Okay, let's talk about Canadian politics and what exactly is happening in Canada regarding to how Canadians feel about some of our political leaders relative to what's happening in kind of the trade tiff battle, war, however you want to put it, with the United States. Joining us right now is the CEO of Abacus Data. It is David Coletto. David, great to chat with you.
Chat with you, Shaun. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so what has shifted here? I guess, where are your numbers right now? What is the gap, or is there a gap between the Conservatives and the Liberals?
So we still see a gap. Our last numbers have the Conservatives ahead by 12 points, which is by most pollsters' counts still more favorable to the Conservatives than some other polls. Others we've seen like the Liberals ahead by 1 or within 3 or 4 points. But that doesn't change the fact that we've seen a big shift. The Liberals are up 9 points. They're at 29% nationally in the course of basically a month and a half. The Conservatives are down 5 or 6. The NDP is sinking rapidly. They're at the lowest level we have tracked their support at 14% since October of 2016. Right. So a whole bunch of things have changed in the course of 2 months. Where the day that Justin Trudeau announced he was resigning, only about 12% of Canadians thought the Liberals deserved to be reelected. His negatives were as high as they've ever been. The country was just in a deep, deep funk. Fast forward to today, and the country's still in a deep, deep funk, but it's being driven less by what people think Trudeau and his government has done. And now the new villain in our story is Donald Trump and the threat that he has posed, not just with the tariffs, but just the constant musing about annexing us and making us the 51st state.
So what about Trump has pushed some Canadians towards the Liberals over the Conservatives? What are they seeing as the difference there?
Well, I think what's changed is the question a lot of voters are asking now, right? Maybe a simple way of framing it is like, what's the job we're hiring for? So before the new year, really, the job that most Canadians were hiring for was somebody who could come in and put the fire out, who could make their life more affordable, who could build more homes, who could just change direction, because people had really felt that after 10 years of a Liberal government, it was time for a change. And Pierre Poilivre was overwhelmingly the choice that people who wanted that job to be filled were thinking of. Today, the job that I think more and more people are actually thinking needs to be filled is who can help navigate, if Canada's a ship, right? Who can navigate this ship through probably the worst storm we've seen in most of our lifetimes. And that means the kinds of qualities, the experience, even the approach might be different. And so the result is, again, I still think the Conservatives are the favorites to win. I still think they're in a stronger position. But, if Mark Carney becomes prime minister, which I think he will be next week, he is opening people's minds to the idea of voting Liberal that Justin Trudeau absolutely wouldn't have, that Chrystia Freeland is not. And that's, in a way, creating a lot of uncertainty and volatility around what that next election outcome might be.
Are there certain demos of Canadians that are more inclined to be pushed in that direction?
Yeah, really fascinating is baby boomers, right? A demographic that was the least friendly to the Liberals over the last 10 years is now increasingly the one that I think might save them, frankly. And that's, I think, happening for 2 reasons. One is we know from our research that boomers are the demographic still most likely, Shaun, to be listening to your radio show, to be watching the news on TV. And they have been consuming this constant stream of Trump news that has made them most likely to say that Trump is the top issue in the country. But at the same time, as a result of that, they've also become the most angry about all of this. They are the ones who most likely say they feel betrayed. They're the most likely to say, I'm going to boycott everything about the United States. They're probably the ones putting up Canadian flags outside their homes, in which they wouldn't have done that except for on Canada Day. And the result is that they are now much more open to voting Liberal. And I think they understand that Mark Carney is likely going to be the next leader. And even though Mark Carney's not a baby boomer, he's slightly younger, he's the most baby boomer of probably the leaders, right?
Yeah.
And so yeah, boomers are like the one is the demo to watch right now, and they're the ones I think who have moved the most in the period that we're talking about.
Now, is that boomers across the country, like even Alberta and Saskatchewan?
Well, everything's relative, right? Like Alberta and Saskatchewan will always have a much lower level of support for liberals, no matter what. Even when the party's winning big majorities, they still, will pick up only a handful of seats in Alberta and maybe none or one in Saskatchewan. But yeah, I think it's all relative. So it's kind of like rising everywhere. But what's actually interesting about Mark Carney and boomers is he's really appealing to people in Quebec. And as a Anglophone potential leader of the Liberal Party, that is something we didn't expect, because there's been some questions around his French, and the evidence so far is he's appealing to Quebecers and older Quebecers, and potentially making it hard for the Bloc Québécois even in that province to hold the support that they have.
I was just going to say that looking at some of your data provincially over the past year, that's Quebec is the province where Pierre has struggled the most, right? And so he's the one with more of the French name. He is the one that speaks very fluent French. This is a very it's like kind of a twist that makes it so interesting.
It does, and like even Leger, another polling company, showed that like in the days after the first tariff threats from Trump, that support for Quebec separation dropped 10 points in literally a week, right? As a signal that like even the most nationalist and separatist of Quebecers are saying, well, hold on a second, maybe at this moment, going it alone is not going to make much sense when we're up against this guy, down south. So yeah, Pierre has always had a tough time breaking through in Quebec. I think it's a historical legacy of Conservatives always struggling in that province. But I think also a little bit of reaction to some of his policies. Yeah. Frankly, like Quebecers are the most likely to care about climate change and think about sustainability and those issues at the top of kind of their list. And they're the least likely to think that Poilievre cares much about it, where that issue is not as prominent elsewhere.
I've had a number of people in the audience, provide feedback or suggestion in even some of my, presentations as of late that, I don't believe it. It's a honeymoon period. It's happened too fast. And the speed at which it has happened has people kind of doubtful. From your experience, is there any validity to that?
I think historically there is some validity to that, right? If you go back to, I was very, very young when Kim Campbell became Liberal conservative leader and prime minister, she was ahead in the polls early on, and then the result was 2 seats for the Conservatives and a complete destruction of that party. John Turner, back in when I was 3 years old in 1984, became prime minister after Pierre Trudeau, and the polls said, rebound for the Liberals. And then, Mulroney won a big majority a few months later. So those are the historical examples we have. Where I'm not certain that we should believe entirely that this is a blip, and that's a blip that's going to, or a bounce that's going to revert, is that the context is different though, right? That the crisis mentality that Trump has created in this country means that I think there's a high likelihood that a lot of voters are going to be looking at their political choices through a very different lens than if Kamala Harris was president of the United States and Justin Trudeau was still going to be prime minister in that election. And so much has changed that I think there is a chance that the Liberals could win another government, that or the Conservatives could only pull off a minority. I think I've been on your show before. Months ago, I would have guaranteed a Conservative victory. I'm far less bullish now on that outcome than I was then.
Yeah. Okay. That's cool. So, what about? I just want to get back to this. All back to Donald Trump and who is the best leader to go about handling him on Canada's behalf. What are they? I get the Carney side of that potentially. What are they saying about the Pierre Poilievre side of that? What are the Conservatives doing wrong? What are the numbers showing you that they're getting? Because what I've heard is they're just going to roll over. So talk about that a little bit.
Well, let me give you an example. We asked a question on a survey a week ago, and we asked people, who do you think the leaders would have voted for if they could vote in the U.S. presidential election in November of 2024? And overwhelmingly people thought that Trudeau and Carney and Singh would have voted for Kamala Harris. Very few thought they would have voted for Trump. But on Poilievre's front, more than half of Canadians thought he would have voted for Donald Trump, and a third thought he would have strongly supported him. And that's, I think, Poilievre's problem, right? Mm. Is that there's, you know, prior to Trump and Trudeau resigning, the thing that held this big new coalition of conservative supporters together was a common desire for change and a dislike for Justin Trudeau. That was the glue that held people who on a lot of other issues don't agree on things, right? Think of that core conservative vote who voted conservative no matter what the last three elections. And then these new voters that had voted NDP or Liberal or other parties coming over and giving it this like 45% that some polls showed they hit at the end of last year. The moment you take Trudeau out of that glue weakens, right? And then what Trump's done is this basically imagine a wedge being shoved right into the middle of that coalition that could be shattering it, because there are people in that coalition who absolutely despise Donald Trump. And there are some in the conservative coalition who actually like him, who like his approach. He likes his disruptiveness. And so the conservative coalition is now fragile in a way it wasn't. And that's creating a challenge for Pierre Poilivre, because when people are asking themselves, who can handle this? It's not just that he would give in to Trump, or that because he agrees with him on some things or might share a little bit of his worldview that he's not going to defend Canada's interests. But it's more about the idea that, and you mentioned Mark Carney can say, I've done things like this before. I've led the country through the financial crisis. I led the UK's financial system through Brexit. I'm made for crises. And Poilievre can't say that yet, right? And people don't believe that. And so the dynamics have completely changed. And so again, if we think about the fact that like an election is about like hiring somebody for a job, well, the job that we're hiring for has changed, I think, for a lot of people.
Fascinating stuff. David, keep up the great work. I really do appreciate you giving us access. I know you're doing a lot of mainstream stuff all the time, more and more, and you still make time for agriculture, and I really do appreciate it.
My pleasure, Shaun. Have a great one.